Hello and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. In his latest nightly address, Volodymyr Zelensky said he is ready for direct and substantive negotiations with Vladimir Putin in Turkey. While the Kremlin is silent about whether Putin will attend the meeting, Zelensky reiterated that Ukraine always supports diplomacy and will be present in Ankara.
I am grateful to the President for his support. I confirmed to him Ukraine's readiness for direct and meaningful negotiations with Putin. Ukraine has always supported diplomacy. I am ready to be in Turkey. Unfortunately, the world has yet to receive a clear response from Russia regarding numerous ceasefire proposals. Russian attacks continue. Moscow remains silent all day on the proposal for a direct meeting. A very strange silence.
During a press conference ahead of Donald Trump's arrival in Turkey, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan highlighted the significance of the back-to-back negotiations over peace in Ukraine. The leader went on to say that a new window of opportunity has emerged to bring the war in Ukraine to an end.
Russia, Ukraine, the United States and European countries are in agreement on holding talks. As the only country that has earned the trust of all parties, we reiterated our readiness to contribute to these negotiations and our willingness to host them. With the latest contacts, we see that a new window of opportunity has opened. God willing, we believe this time the opportunity will not be wasted.
President Volodymyr Zelensky will only meet Russia's President Vladimir Putin for talks in Turkey on Thursday, not other members of the Russian delegation, a Ukrainian presidential advisor said on Tuesday. Our Ukrainian correspondent Oz Chatterjee has the latest.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in his Monday night address said there was a strange silence emanating from the Kremlin regarding ceasefire negotiations between Zelensky and Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Istanbul on Thursday. Now, this was Putin's idea in response to the European leaders of Britain, France, Germany and Poland arriving in Kyiv and threatening Moscow with massive sanctions in concert with the United States if Russia did not agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire beginning on Monday the 12th. Now, Monday the 12th passed and there was no ceasefire. However, Putin made an announcement that he wasn't going to have a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, but he would move to meet with Zelensky and to start direct negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in Istanbul on Thursday. This was Putin's idea put forward in response to this ultimatum from European leaders. Zelensky accepted that proposal, and now we're not hearing anything from the Kremlin whether they intend to send anyone to Istanbul on Thursday. Zelensky has very clearly said that he is only going to negotiate with Putin. He's not going to see a lesser delegation. So the Ukrainians have called the Kremlin's bluff. If Putin was hoping that this proposal would be rejected by Kyiv and that it would make Kyiv look like it was obstructing peace, that certainly hasn't played out. And now the question is, will Putin head to Istanbul on Thursday or not? At the moment, there seems to be no indication that he is planning on heading there. We've also heard that Donald Trump is potentially interested in going to these discussions in Istanbul on Thursday. He's already in the Middle East on a visit to the Gulf, so it wouldn't be very far for him to travel to also visit Istanbul, but still there is no word from the Kremlin regarding this. There is also no further indication from those European leaders on when they're planning to initiate those sanctions, those massive sanctions they threatened against Russia should it not agree to a ceasefire. At the moment, it looks like the leaders are waiting for Thursday to see what happens, and if there is no movement on Thursday for negotiations that Kyiv has accepted, that Kyiv is hoping at least that those European leaders in concert with the United States will apply those sanctions they have threatened against the Kremlin. It's Oz Chatterjee reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Russia's attacks on Ukraine continue despite calls for a 30-day ceasefire from Ukraine and European allies, with Moscow targeting several regions with drones and guided bombs, marking a significant escalation after the May 12th deadline for an unconditional ceasefire expired.
In a series of Russian overnight strikes, Mykolaiv, Kirovohrad, Vinnytsia and Odessa were hit with drones, while the Sumy region in the northeast was targeted with guided bombs. The attacks followed a day of ongoing Russian assaults, and Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha reported multiple casualties, with 7 wounded in one drone strike. In response, the Kremlin rejected the ceasefire as an ultimatum, but invited Ukraine to sit down for direct talks in Istanbul later this week. Ukrainian President Zelensky has accepted the invitation, agreeing to meet Putin on May 15th, although the Russian leader's attendance remains uncertain. Meanwhile, European countries have pledged to implement new sanctions against Russia's banking and energy sectors if the ceasefire is not honored. And a new round of sanctions is expected to be unveiled on May 14th. US President Donald Trump, however, has shifted his stance, now urging Ukraine to engage in peace talks with Putin and even suggesting he may join the discussions in Istanbul.
A significant new ruling from the United Nations has found Russia responsible for the downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17, which tragically killed all 298 passengers on board in 2014.
The UN's aviation agency, the International Civil Aviation Organization, has confirmed that Russia violated international air law by downing the passenger plane with a Russian-made missile over eastern Ukraine during the conflict between pro-Russian rebels and Ukrainian forces. The flight en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur was struck over the Donbas region, killing passengers from several countries, including 196 Dutch nationals. The agency's ruling follows a 2022 case brought by the Australian and Dutch governments, both of whom have praised the decision. Moreover, this ruling builds on previous legal actions, including a Dutch court sentencing in absentia 3 individuals linked to the downing to life in prison.
The European Commission says all options are on the table to exert financial pressure on Russia to stop its invasion of Ukraine. The EU executive made the statement in response to TVP World asking about whether capital controls and tariffs were being considered an option to get around Hungary's persistent veto. We are joined live by our EU correspondent Angela Skujins from Brussels. Hello, Angela. Would this option work, and is it a serious one?
Yes, so what we've heard from that EU executive, as it's just said, is that all scenarios are being considered by the European Union. Now, this one in particular comes off the back of reporting today in the Financial Times newspaper that according to at least 5 officials that were granted anonymity, the European Commission has presented them a legal option to circumvent Hungary threatening and eventually using its veto power to torpedo the rollover of sanctions as well as really material and military support for Ukraine. So according to this reporting, this would be a backdoor way for the EU to continue putting the pressure on the Kremlin to hopefully stop the invasion of Ukraine. We know that most of these sanctions are set to expire in July, so we're not totally sure which way Hungary will go, but according to the most recent European Council, scheduled for only a couple of months ago here in the Belgian capital, we heard those harrowing statements from European Council President Antonio Costa, which said the 26 are together with one isolated. Of course, he is referring to Hungary, but finance ministers are also meeting in the Belgian capital today to discuss the cost of Russia's ongoing invasion. The 17th sanctions package is also being hammered out. We know that at least 200 vessels are being considered added to the list of shadow fleet vessels which have been helping the Kremlin circumvent those EU sanctions to bring in oil profits to Moscow as it continues its invasion of Ukraine. But we're hoping for some more formal commentary at a press conference scheduled for later this afternoon. But that's all from me in Brussels. I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
Angela Skujins reporting live from Brussels. Thank you very much. European energy ministers from across the EU are meeting in Warsaw today for an informal summit focused on charting the continent's energy roadmap. With Ukraine's energy minister present, securing Ukraine's winter energy needs is a key priority alongside discussions on regional support for Moldova and long-term energy cooperation. Our reporter Sasha Farbach is on the ground and following the meetings.
And although it's an informal gathering of energy ministers from across the European Union, it very much has an important message here. Also in attendance here is the Ukrainian energy minister as well, discussing his country's roadmap for the future. Very much at the core here is the discussion of where Ukraine stands in terms of its process of these so-called acquis, these chapters of accession, and energy is one amongst 35 of them. So already here there's been optimism as various ministers and undersecretaries arrived this morning here in Warsaw, about saying that they are very much encouraged by what they've seen in Ukraine so far. And also present here, interestingly, is a representative from the International Energy Agency as well, and also an undersecretary from the UK, and really gives you an idea of very much how it's not just the European Union, but very much the entire region. Now, Moldova as well on the agenda of its current trajectory into the European Union as well, and also where the European Union stands in terms of preparing Ukraine for the winter months, which are still some months away, but also asking very much the Polish energy minister, her arrival here, what matters for Poland as well, given several hybrid attacks and threats to energy infrastructure, considering wind, offshore wind as well, and nuclear.
When it comes to nuclear power projects being developed near the shores of the Baltic, but also wind farms, a new agreement currently being signed by the Baltic countries lays out the scope of joint efforts in this area, including broader monitoring. Internal affairs and defense ministers of respective countries, alongside their security services, are also involved in the process. We're going to be working extensively on these issues.
With that also, this was mirrored by the Lithuanian energy minister, very much himself touting that on his arrival, how his country has very much made sure that its dependency on Russia is no longer. And he wants to carry that on for other countries as well across the bloc. And also interesting enough, asking the question of protecting energy infrastructure, he said that there should be some kind of budgetary line in the MFF, so that major budget for the European Union in securing that and making sure that it's on a technical level, and it's also that there is efficiency and oversight on how that's done. So that's significant there. And also here in attendance is the Energy Commissioner, Mr. Jorgensen, very much on pushing the issue of what could happen if the United States or Russia come to some sort of agreement on trying to push Russian gas or Russian energy back into Europe. Now, that was reported by Reuters some days ago. He had a very clear and adamant response to that.
We do not wish to import as much as one single molecule in the future. So for us, it's a very clear roadmap to end the dependency. And this is something that is independent of other talks that might go on. The European Union is very clear. We do not wish energy from Russia in the future. We don't wish it now, and we will not wish it after a peace.
So not a single molecule of Russian energy here in Europe. That's the policy, not just now. Remember, this whole roadmap that was set out a week ago very much sets about that the European Union wants to wean off completely in terms of oil, in terms of gas, in terms of everything, and nuclear as well, within the end of 2027. Echoed again by many ministers, including the German energy minister on her arrival here. So although an informal summit here, it's a time of trying to see where the debate is, where the consensus is for that formal one, which will be in June. But so far, although it might be an informal gathering, the message is strong and clear. That's Sasha Frambach for TVP World in Warsaw.
Despite the Serbian president's visit to Moscow, Belgrade remains committed to the path of joining the European Union. President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, has stressed, however, that condemning Russia for the invasion of Ukraine is one of the requirements to join the EU. European Council President Antonio Costa visited Belgrade on Tuesday. The trip marks the first leg of Costa's visit to all 6 Western Balkan countries. In Belgrade, the European Council leader has said that enlargement of the European Union to the Western Balkans remains his priority. The visit comes after Serbian president visited Moscow for the Victory Parade on May 9th. Before the trip, the EU had warned Serbia of serious consequences of such a move. In Belgrade, Costa has said that, quote, a key element of our common foreign and security policy is a clear condemnation of the Russian brutal invasion of Ukraine and the support to Ukraine to achieve a just and lasting peace. And that wraps up the midday report at 2 p.m. on TVP World. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more. Goodbye.